Well, we're going to transition into the policy session. And as we do so, I'm hoping to recognize a policymaker in the room. Hope he's still here. Senator Graggart, are you with us still? Thank you. Senator Graggart is from the area, is a native of Creighton. I believe he's the only state senator who was with us at the conference. We really appreciate that, and has also been essential in getting the Healthy Soils Task Force formed in the legislature in the most recent session, LB 243. It's not the catchiest of names, but it is an accurate title for what will be discussed over the next 45 minutes or so. So I'd like to call up to the stage, I think first, our moderator for the session, Hillary Miracle. Hillary wears a kind of dizzying number of hats that include owner-operator of a family farm, sustainability officer with the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, and she's also an instructor here at Northeast Community College and a Boone County Commissioner. That's a lot on your plate. And now you're a moderator.
All right, thanks, Jesse. And I need to update my LinkedIn profile, obviously. I'm not a commissioner anymore. I've moved on from that, but thanks. It was definitely an enlightening experience and learned a lot. So Brian and Dave, if you guys want to come on up, I think we're going to run this one a little bit differently. Hopefully a little more discussion. We're coming up on lunch here and hopefully have some interaction. So with us today, we have a really great panel. We've got Dave Aiken, and he's a professor at UNL and Ag Econ. I think most of you have probably met him and worked with him. And then also Brian Bruckner, who is our Assistant General Manager in the Lower Elkhorn NRD. Thank you both for being here. Do you want to do quick introductions or jump right in?
Morning. I'm Dave Aiken, and when we talked about this session, they said no slideshow, so I'm almost got two hands tied behind my back. But there is a handout. I didn't get it done in time to get it put in your packet, but it's out at the registration table. So if you want any of this stuff, you can get the handout, and it'll have a little more detail than what I'll be able to do this morning. I'm just going to talk very briefly about the legal background in terms of non-point source pollution control. Talk a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay program as an area where states have gotten more aggressive in terms of trying to deal with this problem, and then speculate a little bit about some possible applications to Nebraska. When the Clean Water Act was adopted in 1972, this was the first time that the federal government had moved into the into the area of water pollution control. And so they focused on what seemed at the time to be the obvious targets, industrial discharges into stream and municipal wastewater discharges into rivers and streams. And those are the point sources, and that's the principal focus of the Federal Clean Water Act, and what states administer if they administer the EPA program at the state level. Non-point source pollution, that is ag runoff, would be the easiest example of that we would be interested in. Was not really a high-profile issue back then. Since then, it's become clear that a lot of the water quality problems, surface water quality problems that we still have, trace back to a non-point source pollution control, or the lack of it. And so it's an issue. Congress has not revisited it, and given the kind of where we are politically in Washington, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So it's going to be something that EPA will encourage states to do, and where states are willing to pick up the ball and run with it, I think EPA will be there to assist, but it will be, the state's going to have to kind of raise their hand and say, we want to work on this. And there have been some regions around the United States where that has happened. The Chesapeake Bay is one. The Great Lakes is another, and then the Gulf of Mexico and the hypoxia problem with the Mississippi, Missouri River basins would be a third area where there has been some state interest in trying to work cooperatively with the federal government in terms of trying to reduce non-point source pollution. We also know that nitrates is a drinking water quality issue. And in Nebraska, I remember when I started work in Nebraska in 1975, I read the papers, of course, and every few months there would be another small community in Nebraska that would go on the nitrate list. And I didn't know what the nitrate list was, and I didn't know why these communities were going on the nitrate list, but in time I found out. And we developed some independent policies that had nothing to do with the Clean Water Act, but had to do with our system of natural resource districts in terms of trying to deal with this non-point source pollution problem. And we've had some success in Nebraska. Central Platte NRD, headquartered in Grand Island, has gone from average parts per million of nitrates in groundwater from just under 20 part per million to, I believe, around 14 or 14 and a half. So a significant reduction over 20 some, maybe 30 years. But it's taken a while to get there, but through improved irrigation, water management, and through improved nutrient management, they have been able to see those improvements. But getting back to the nitrates in drinking water, it's been groundwater in Nebraska, and so the NRDs have been the principal focus of that. In a lot of states, it's surface water. And in our neighbor to the east, Iowa, I'm sure you all remember the 2015 lawsuit by the Des Moines Waterworks against some agricultural drainage districts in Iowa on the Raccoon River, where they argued that the draining of the water from the fields into the river was causing their water to become a high nitrate water that they had to go through advanced water treatment in order to treat down to drinking water standards. And this is, we've seen this in Nebraska, of course, for our smaller communities as well, having to do the reverse osmosis and other advanced water treatment to try to get their nitrate into under the 10 part per million limit. That lawsuit was ultimately dismissed on procedural grounds, and that under state law you couldn't sue a drainage district. But this spring, some clean water groups have sued state officials in Iowa, the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Natural Resources, saying that, well, I haven't seen the complaints, so I'm not sure what they're saying, but they're saying that they should have fixed this. So I'm guessing that's what it is. And not within the last few weeks, the judge in Iowa has said that the case can go to trial. The state tried to get it dismissed, and they said, no, this can go to trial. So who knows how this is going to turn out. But this is something to bear watching, of course. And if there is liability found somewhere along the way, then that will be I think something that will be a kind of a major issue for agriculture, not just in Iowa, but agriculture in general. Okay, the Chesapeake Bay. Several Bay states have worked beginning in 1983 to try to reduce nutrient runoff into the Bay. It was in danger of becoming basically having a large dead zone through the hypoxic transformation. And so the states agreed to try to get a handle on nutrients getting off into the Bay. And since then, they have reduced the nitrate loadings by 32%, phosphorus by 41%, and sediment by 28%. And they've done this, one, by helping municipalities adopt very, very efficient wastewater treatment plants for municipal systems to reduce their nitrate load down to just 1 or 2% of what it is before the water is treated. So very high treatment levels, and they do a lot of interesting things with that. The other side has been the ag side, and this is very interesting for me because back there, the main source of ag nutrients for a lot of producers is chicken litter. These states are centers of poultry production in the United States, and so they have lots of manure. It's free basically for the taking, and so that is the major source of pollution, and so the major source of agricultural nutrients that are used. And so they have their focus is on manure, although their regulations also apply to commercial fertilizer, liquid fertilizer. And that's the stuff that they do is similar to what livestock producers who get federal permits for their livestock facility have to do. They have to do a nutrient management plan where they test the manure, test the soil, determine an appropriate application rate, and have setbacks from streams and wells and so forth. They do the same type of thing, only they take it kind of to another level. They require everybody who applies the manure to go through this process. Now, outside of these states, if you're the neighbor to the CAFO, the concentrated animal feeding operation that has to do a comprehensive nutrient management plan, the CAFO operator has to do all of this. But if he gives some manure to the neighbor does not have to go through this under federal law. So this is where they have stepped up and changed their state law to require these nutrient management requirements to the manure users rather than simply the manure generators in terms of the livestock facilities, livestock operations. And so they have to develop what looks to me like a farm conservation plan and plan the nutrient, the manure applications kind of field by field based on soil tests and manure tests and so forth. And they go a bit further in terms of their nutrient management than I think what is required in Nebraska. They also ban winter application. The manure has to be incorporated within 48 hours unless it's applied to no-till or to pasture land or to hayland. If manure is applied in the fall onto fallow ground, after your row crop harvest, for example, then there has to be a cover crop on that as well. And 10-foot application setback for streams, larger ones for wells, and so forth. So they do quite a bit. They also move. The state ag department has a program to move manure out of this area that drains into the bay, into the other parts of the state where there may be less poultry production and where there will be farmers willing to use that manure. They would be subject to the same manure regulations, but it's getting manure out of the watersheds that drain into the bay, and so that is a part of their overall program that the state helps with. The other thing that the state has done is that they have revised their P index, and I think every state has their own phosphorus index for helping crop consultants and farmers determine how much phosphorus to apply to fields and so forth. They have redone it and have made surface water quality protection a pretty high priority. And I'm not going to go through the details of it because I'm not an agronomist, and I hate to see the spreadsheet that this is put into because there's lots and lots of data that farmers have to collect before it gets in there. But the thing that really jumped out at me is that if you have very high levels of phosphorus in your soil, above 500 scoring on their fertility index value, then you cannot put additional manure or phosphorus onto that land until the phosphorus levels come down. So it's a very interesting program, and I think since we have lots of livestock in Nebraska, there's some things in there that we might want to take a look at. The one last thing that I'd like to mention is that this sort of, again, betrays, how long I've kind of been at this. But back in the 80s, when we had special protection areas for groundwater quality under our NRD laws, the Groundwater Management Protection Act, there was one established in south central Nebraska, the Hardy Superior Special Protection Area. And as those of you who work with the NRDs or the ag producers know, most of the nitrate type regulations in Nebraska are triggered by how much nitrate is in the groundwater. So if it's a 5, then it's voluntary education. If you get up to 7, then maybe you have to do irrigation scheduling and some soil testing and whatever. And the higher it gets, then the more management requirements are put into place. What they did in the Hardy Superior Special Protection Area was they said, well, the first 5 years, we're going to have this advanced irrigation and advanced nutrient management program that all of our producers will have to implement, but they just have to implement it on their largest row crop field. So they don't have to do it for their whole farm. They just have to do it on one farm. And then, so that was the first 5 years. Then the second phase was, then they applied it to all of their cropland. And it doesn't matter what the nitrate level was. In some areas, it's probably around 5 or 6. Other areas is probably 9, 10, or 11. But it didn't matter. If you could be in a low nitrate area or a high nitrate area, it was the same program, the same irrigation management and nutrient management program for all of the producers within this special protection area. So that's always seemed to be kind of forward-looking and prevention-oriented, which I think is the attitude that we would like to have if we can. If we're not already over 10 parts per million, then it's kind of a remediation type thing. But that I thought that's one that we ought to think more about in Nebraska, and that it may have some relevance in the Brazil area that we're focusing on today. Thank you very much.